Hi again then guys, and welcome to another Forza Motorsport 7 specific car review, and this time it's a big one. It's an important car, a car which a lot of people have wanted to see in games, of course. It's obvious why. The successor to the iconic and sometimes controversial Veyron, the Chiron. Bigger, better, faster, more expensive, more powerful, but also heavier. So how is that going to impact the car? Because when you look at the Chiron, and I'm sure there are those who would feel differently about this, but when I look at the Chiron, it kind of reminds me of if you compare the Ferrari 488 GTB to a 458 Italia. Because if you approach the car purely on a visual basis, you could very easily think that it's just an evolution of the exact same thing. That is not the case. The 488 GTB is a very different car on a mechanical level to the 458 Italia. Likewise, the Chiron, although similar to the Veyron, in some ways very similar, of course visually, that's partially due to the design style of Bugatti, it's not just a more powerful version of the same thing. And as soon as you drive this car in the game, you can straight away feel that. Now there are two things in particular which really hit me first of all about driving the car. The first one is that it's a lot more playful than the Veyron is. Although it is a heavier car and a much more powerful and more torquey one, it does still like to drift a lot more than the Veyron naturally does. The Veyron has very heavy steering, even the Supersport does, although not quite as bad. And of course you can adjust that, you can improve it, you can drop the weight, but the difference with the Chiron is although the handling is still heavy, it's only heavy when entering the corner. About midway through a corner, and sometimes a little bit earlier, maybe a third of the way through, it will suddenly kick that tail out and get a nice all-wheel drive drift. That's pretty cool, because it means that the car is nowhere near as cumbersome as its literal 2 metric ton weight would suggest. Because the Veyron was already a 1.9 ton car, this is a full, well, in fact it's over 100 kilos heavier again. Now, making up for that is a lot more power. Now the Veyron of course had around 1,000 horsepower, the Supersport almost 1,200. This one makes both of those pale in comparison, 1,479 horsepower. Now, unsurprisingly, you cannot upgrade the power in the game, and that's something which basically has always been the case in the Forza franchise. Cars which have well beyond 1,000 horsepower, you basically can't upgrade them. The Ultimate Aero, the Veyron Supersport, the Koenigsegg 1-to-1, even the Hennessy Venom, which nowadays doesn't sound quite as insane as it did back then with 1,200 horsepower, you can't upgrade those. That's the power that you get, that's what you have to make do with, which is why on Horizon 3, the cars with the 1,500 horsepower Lambo engine conversions stand out so much. So in a funny kind of way, even though this car is immensely powerful, it almost doesn't sound that impressive if you've played the Horizon games, but of course this car was optimised to have that much power. And that's something which I've touched on before with the Veyron. It's a car which is very easy to be lethargic about because familiarity breeds contempt. If you spend enough time around something which maybe you didn't love in the first place, you can very easily get sick of seeing it and sick of hearing about it. And with the Veyron, there are so many produced, and it's a car which has been so heavily talked about and compared with other vehicles, that of course there are some people who would get sick of hearing about it. At the end of the day, it just seems like this big, heavy, bloated luxury barge which has straight line speed which doesn't sound as impressive anymore. You've got Koenigsegg's doing 285 miles per hour, Hennessy's doing over 270, even the Ultimate Aero beat it at 258, so who really cares anymore? And that, in an unfortunate kind of way, can actually transfer over to the Chiron. It's an easy car to go into with the mindset, if you already don't like the Veyron, of thinking, well, who really cares? It's just a more powerful Veyron. Trust me on this, it really isn't. The Chiron is a significantly different car to the Veyron in terms of, in particular, how it handles. Because, of course, straight line speed is fast. That goes without saying. It's around 270. I haven't fully upgraded mine in terms of putting a race gearbox in there, dropping the weight, tyres, etc, etc. But the fact that you can't adjust the power means that I should think it's probably going to be in a similar kind of boat to the Hennessy Venom and the Koenigsegg 1-to-1, in as much as you can improve the acceleration, but not necessarily the top speed that much. because of course most of the cars in the Forza franchise, especially the motorsport games, are very resistant to going over 270. There are some which can, the Saleen S7 for instance and some others, but most of them don't like to. Then you get to Horizon 3 once again, and you can even go over 300 with a Jag D-Type, because it's not quite as realistic, let's put it that way. However, this car does get there very, very quickly. The acceleration is very good, and the main issue which the Veyron always had is that although the all-wheel drive makes it monstrous off the line, and the top speed in itself is good, it's that mid-range and especially, ironically, top end where it's not quite as good. Now, when you tune it up, it can be great, but that's with a lot more power, and something like an Ultimate Aero or a Hennessy Venom or the vast majority of later Koenigsegg's, basically from the Agera onward, can easily beat the Veyron for top-end acceleration, all of which are rear-wheel drive. Now, of course, you can convert them, but even without an all-wheel drive conversion on Horizon, again, they can still beat it, because they just hook up that power and torque so much better. They're lighter, they're sometimes more aerodynamically efficient, not always, and they can beat the Veyron. With the Chiron, that could still be the case with the right tuning, but they're going to have a harder time at beating it, and it's going to be more on par, because this is more powerful than the Veyron ever has been in the franchise, so that's a lot to work with. You've also got almost 1,200 pound-feet of torque, and even in its stock form, and this is one of the things that really impressed me about the Chiron, even in stock form, with that 2-ton weight, 1,995 kilos, which for most supercars would be ridiculous, it still has 741 horsepower per ton because of how much sheer power it has. Now, of course, compared to a Koenigsegg 1-to-1 or a Hennessy Venom, that doesn't sound that great because they've got around 1,000. But of course, what many gamers don't factor in, especially younger gamers, and it's no fault of their own, it's just something which they wouldn't even think about, this car wasn't designed for a game. It's a real-world car, just like all of them are. So, in the real world, people who have this kind of money don't just want straight-line performance. They want comfort, they want elegance, they want build quality, they want something that they can cruise around Monaco and show off in, and then fly down the Autobahn at 270 and pop to the shops for a bottle of milk in it like you would in an Audi or a Beamer. That's exactly what the Veyron can do, and that's what the Chiron can do. It just does it to another level. So in that respect, it is similar to the Veyron, of course. But beyond that, it's a very, very different car. Now, I would warn against the entry into corners, because as I said earlier, it's heavy initially, and that's something which you need to watch out for, because just like the Veyron, because you have so much weight as well as power propelling you forward, in a similar way to a train, the braking is not exactly its strong point. On the end of the Lassart Straight here at the Le Mans, especially without the chicanes, you have to brake a lot earlier than you might think, because not only does the power and torque get you up to such high speed before you even know it, but the sheer weight of the car resists slowing down as well. So although I'm not a fan of the Chiron or the Veyron for the most part, I have a lot more respect for it than I do love, it is a very interesting car from the new pack, by far the most popular one for obvious reasons, and even though technically it costs 1.55 million, of course it actually doesn't, because you get it free with the pack. So I would say this is a car which, if you're a Bugatti Veyron fan, you will definitely love, but also, if you're a Hennessy Venom fan or a Koenigsegg fan, you might actually like it too, because it almost feels like a little bit of a blend of those. It's not quite as understated as the Veyron in terms of the handling. It's got a little bit more playfulness there, which a lot of people will be happy about. So overall, that's it for this pick. Of course, I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.